Hi, crafties, and welcome to Weekend Crafting Adventures. I'm Kim. Um, I am super excited to share this crafting project with you. I have been waiting a really long time to do this project. And the project that I'm going to share with you today is actually cutting basswood with a knife blade on my Cricut maker to create one of those seasonal home signs where you have the letters H and then images that you switch out for every season, where the O would be, and then an M and an E. And so let me tell you a little bit about the inspiration behind this craft project. First of all, I have been intrigued about cutting wood with my Cricut maker ever since I learned that the Cricut maker could cut wood. So I've just been really looking forward to trying that process of cutting out wood and creating something individualized with this machine and the basswood and the knife blade. The other inspiration behind this project is that in our family room, we have a very large stone fireplace area with a dark wood mantle, and the mantle is huge. It's a big open space family room, and it's just really hard to find things that don't look tiny on that mantle that kind of brings some energy into the room. So over the years that we've lived here, I keep trying to find different ways to utilize the mantle, but also get things that really could hold their own in that large space. And I thought that this seasonal sign that I could make using the Cricut and the basswood would be a perfect thing to put on the mantle, because it could stay there all year. And then really all I'm going to do is switch every season where that O is for home, a different image that represents that season. And for example, this month I'd have the pumpkin up there where the O would be. In my search on the internet to find out how to make this seasonal home sign with my Cricut maker, so I found this perfect video tutorial on Pinterest, and it is called the DIY Seasonal Home Sign with the Cricut Knife Blade, and it is from everydayjenny.com. And the best part about this tutorial is that everything you need, all the materials that pretty much I used and that you will need for this project, are all listed right there in her blog post and in this video tutorial. And there is something that I had never tried before. It is a link to this project in your Cricut design space. I'll talk a little more about that when I get to the experience of this project. But wow, is that a really cool function that I get to use for the first time in this project? Before I share my experience with this project, I do want to mention that I bought a brand new Cricut knife blade for this project, and I also bought the Cricut brand basswood. I did that because I have never cut wood before with the Cricut maker, and I did not know what I was getting into, and I figured the best way to start would be to use the actual materials and tools from Cricut to use in the Cricut maker. They are not cheap, but I really was excited to make this sign and to cut the wood. And so I did take a lot of time waiting to get to the right time so I could purchase the knife blade and the Cricut brand Basswood. I also figured that I probably would have a better outcome if I used those brand name materials. I did purchase a already made sign that ended up being about 29 inches long, pretty big, and 8 inches tall. And I did that because I did want to save some time. Really, it was already painted white behind, and I knew I was going to use stain, just like Everyday Jenny shows in her blog post and in her tutorial. I just stained around the outside of that pre-made sign where I was going to place my letters and images to make sure that the stain was dark enough that it was going to look really good in my family room, where we also have dark wood. After gathering all of the materials that I needed for this project, which there are a lot, it's a complicated project, but again, I was super excited to make this sign and add it to our home decor. So it was really fun collecting everything. But there are some really important tips that are mentioned in the blog and video tutorial that talk about things you need to do when you are going to be cutting basswood with your Cricut maker. There is definitely an important tip of those little white ring stars that are on the metal rod of your Cricut that roll when you put your materials in and out on the mat. All of those need to be moved all the way over to the right so that when your material and wood is going into your Cricut machine, it doesn't get caught up on those rings. You also definitely need to tape down the basswood to a strong grip mat. There's no way around that. In order to keep that wood in place, you really have to make sure you're taping it down onto the mat. And the last tip that she mentions in her informational tutorial is that you want to have Cricut do one extra pass with the knife blade over those image, cutting them. And so these projects take a lot longer because when you do cut the basswood with Cricut, once you press that go button, Cricut is automatically going to do 14 passes. 14 passes before it tells you that it's ready to come out and for you to remove the material. So we're talking a good 20 to 30 minutes for your material to be cut out on Cricut. And that's a lot different than vinyl and a lot of other materials that I cut on Cricut. So keep that in mind. This project is definitely going to add some time. So anyway, those tips are extremely important and definitely need to be followed because you don't want to damage your machine and you want to make sure that you get the best outcome. So I'm going to start sharing with you my experience cutting the basswood. I followed all of the instructions and got everything ready to go. And I will tell you, one of the coolest parts of this project was clicking that link to her Cricut design template. So I have a laptop computer, and that is what I use when I'm using my Cricut Maker and Design Space. And I do think you need to have a laptop computer in order for this link to work for Cricut Design Space. It basically, in her blog, she has a little link that says click here for Cricut Design Space template. And sure enough, you click that, and on my laptop, a little pop-up window shows up that says allow to open your Cricut design space. So I clicked it. And once you do that, your Cricut design space opens and right there pops up Jenny with her template for the seasonal home sign. Can I tell you what a time saver that is for somebody that's working full time that wants to do this project in a weekend? All you have to do is go in and say, click edit, copy, and boom, a new project in your Cricut design space opens with every single image that she used for the home sign, all of the vinyl sayings, all of the sizing already done. Really, all you have to do is have the materials prepared and there, and then you can hit the make it button. That was super cool. So I'm really excited to cut the wood. I get it all taped down to the mat. I'm following all of the instructions and I go ahead and get my Cricut maker going to cut the wood. Oh, the other really important thing you need to do before you use your knife blade is make sure you calibrate your Cricut maker for the knife blade. It pops up in that little lined options on the left side of Cricut design space. If you go into that, there'll be an area for calibration, and you really do want to make sure you calibrate your machine for that knife blade before you start. So anyway, I am watching my Cricut cut away at the basswood, and I started with letters instead of images. So I thought at first I might try to do the word welcome because it is a longer word, and I thought with having a big mantle that I could still use that O for all of the different images I was going to make, but it would give me a little bit of a larger outcome for my project. So the first two letters that I cut were a W and an E. And it did take about 22 minutes for 14 cut passes of each letter. And then I followed the tip to do one extra pass. And the important thing about this is that you have to leave your Cricut mat with the basswood tape to it in your machine and just press that go button again to get another cutting pass. Don't remove your mat with the wood out of it. Just keep it right there on the Cricut and hit cut or go again. I did that. That only took a couple minutes and I'm super excited. I untape the wood and I'm trying to, I guess for lack of a better word, weed the wood. I'm really thinking at this point that the letters are going to pop right out because everything I'd read and in the blog post online said if you do the one extra cut pass that your wood is pretty easily just going to pop right out. That was not the case for me. Really, I could not believe it, but there was, when I flipped over my basswood on the back, I couldn't even see any indentation that the knife blade had made it all the way through the wood. So I wasn't really sure what to do. And so I got out my X-Acto knife and I started weeding my letters out of the basswood, just following those cut lines that my Cricut maker had started and trying to just gently cut down, cut down. And then I realized I had to use a lot more pressure and I am weeding out now basswood. Not really what I thought this was going to be like. So that took a lot of time. And as I'm coming down on the E, all of a sudden, I hear snap. My letter broke. So here I am, my first time making this using the basswood, and my letters don't pop out like I thought they would. I'm using my X-Acto knife, following the cut lines to get my letters out, and the basswood snaps. So trashed that letter and had to go on and use another piece of basswood and get going again with the cutting process. So I did that. I taped it down. This time I did an E and another letter. And I did 4 or 5 extra passes. I figured if one pass is not going to get this wood cut the way that I thought it should be, or the way that I think it should be, just popping out, then let me try 5 passes. For sure, that's going to make a huge difference in this project. So that takes a lot of time. Again, those first 14 passes take about 22 minutes. And so I did 5 extra passes, and I get the tape off. And again, I flip over the basswood, and there is no cut lines all the way through the basswood. So now I'm thinking that I'm doing something wrong. I must be missing something. This cannot be right. This cannot be the experience of cutting wood on the Cricut machine, right? Like, there's no way. It is not enjoyable. It is taking a really long time to cut. And then on top of that, it's taking a really long time to weed with my X-Acto knife. So I'm wondering, maybe I missed a setting. Is there a way that I could do more pressure? So I tape up the next wood while I'm trying to figure this out. And when you're about to start your project, usually there's a drop down box for pressure. It's either default, more, or less are your options. There is not that option when you are using the knife blade and cutting basswood. It is just one level of pressure. So I go ahead and decide I am just going to keep pressing that go button after the original 14 passes of cutting while I'm weeding out my letters that I just finished. I'm just going to keep pushing that go button until I have finished weeding out the other images that had just come out of the Cricut Maker. And I want to tell you, by the end of this, I was doing 14 extra passes, and I still was not getting my Cricut knife blade to cut all the way through the basswood. I can't tell you how much basswood I broke, the frustration in weeding it. The basswood definitely would snap when I was using my X-Acto knife on the really skinny areas, on the curves. That was a challenge. It just was not the experience that I thought it would be. And I was so disappointed. I so wanted to love this project. Like, I so wanted to say, this is awesome. Cutting the basswood with the Cricut Maker is a must do. I can't say that. I completed cutting out my letters and my images, but I did not get to use the word welcome for 2 reasons. One, because the letters that I did come out, by the time I tried to fit them on my sign, they weren't going to fit. That's my bad, my mistake, is that I should have been a little more careful with the sizing of the letters. But I didn't have enough letters that I weeded that didn't break to make the word welcome. I had already purchased 2 sets of the Cricut Basswood. You get 4 pieces of basswood that are 12 inches long by 6 inches. And so I went through both of those sets, so all 8 pieces, and I still had to order more because in order to just get the word home with the images for the each month or season that I wanted to switch out on the sign, I couldn't do it because it kept breaking. And I was super careful. I was using an X-Acto knife. I was taking my time around the corners. I don't know. It did not work for me. There was definitely a couple of times that I thought that I am not going to finish this project. I am going to give up. That is not my personality. And I really wanted this sign. I really wanted to get past the cutting of the wood part, which I thought was going to be fun, that was not fun at all. And I wanted to get to like the staining part and the painting and the decorating with vinyl. Like I was really looking forward to that. So I did not give up. What I ended up doing is I had an E that split and an H that split. And I ended up taking some Gorilla wood glue and gluing where those letters split together because I just wasn't going to give up and I wasn't going to cut any more wood. So I used that wood glue and let it dry overnight and decided that it was time to move on to the staining and the painting and the decorating with vinyl, and that this was going to make up for all of that ridiculous part of cutting basswood on the Cricut. So that's what I did. Once I got home, which is what I ended up doing because those were the letters that I could get cut out. And actually, like I just said, the H and the E both had to have wood glue on them. I did cut out a pumpkin, a round circle that was going to put, I was going to put some white heat transfer vinyl on for a snowflake, a heart for February, and then a 4-leaf clover for March, a bunny for April, and then a watermelon slice for summertime and a star for July. And all of those images are in the link that I was talking about earlier. So those were the images that I actually did get cut out. So I had all of those pieces and I had the H and the M and the E. So I got to staining and that was fun. I did use a bit of a darker stain than what she talks about in her tutorial. And I'll make sure I put the name of the stain that I used in my blog post so that you can see that's different than what she did. And I stained all of the pieces, the different images. I stained the letters and I stained the little edge of my sign. My sign was already painted white in the background, so I wanted to leave that. So I made sure I just did the edge with the stain, let those dry overnight. And that wood glue did leave some discoloration. It did not stain up and look the same as the other letters. So I took some of my brown acrylic paint that I was using for the other images that I was going to paint. And I just touched up those little discolored areas and you can't even tell that it was discolored at all. So at least I was happy that I salvaged the H and the E and I still used them even though they did split. After the stain was dry, I got to paint. And I did the same colors that she shows on her tutorial. I thought they looked really cute. Some different colors on those different images. I did leave the H and the M and the E just with the dark stain. And then on top of those painted images, I put some heat transfer vinyl. I didn't know you could put heat transfer vinyl on wood. So that was a really cool part of this project and something that I wasn't expecting. And it worked really well. So all of those got done very easily. I put a little white pom pom on the back of the bunny to be the little tail for April. And it was really fun, that part of the project. So let me give you my crafting keepers for this project. If you are going to cut your basswood with your Cricut maker, if you decide to take on that challenge, make sure you do extra passes. Leave your material taped onto your mat and do not push that unload button. I would definitely push the go button at least 5 more times, if not more than that, depending on what kind of result you have gotten throughout your project. But do more than one extra cut pass for sure. I think that will make a difference for you. The other crafting keeper is putting the heat transfer vinyl on wood. That is pretty cool. I think that I am going to find some sort of project where instead of using permanent vinyl, I'm going to use the heat transfer vinyl. It worked great with my Cricut Easy Press and the heat transfer vinyl that I had hanging around in my craft corner. That brings me to my satisfaction rating for this project. I am sure you can guess, no big surprise, this is going to get a 2. I really was disappointed in the wood cutting process with my Cricut maker. I will take full responsibility. It could be something that I did, but I had a brand new knife blade that I bought from Cricut, took it out of the packaging and put it in my machine, calibrated my machine, and I used the Cricut Basswood. So knowing that I did all of those things and that I was having to do 14 extra passes of cutting and it still was not cutting through the basswood, that just was so not enjoyable. It took way too much time, way too much money, and way too much frustration to be enjoyable. I craft because it is fun and enjoyable. And when that fun factor goes out the window, it doesn't do it for me. So even though the staining and the painting and the decorating and actually the outcome, it's beautiful. Like when you see the sign, I think it's a great, fun project. But here's what I would say. If you, one, don't have a Cricut maker, so you don't have the option of cutting wood, or two, you want to save some time, save some money, save some frustration, I would go get the little wood letters and images, just the plain wood at a craft store, and you can still stain them, paint them, add heat transfer vinyl or permanent vinyl to those pieces and create a seasonal sign. You don't have to go through the frustration. You don't have to pack your patience, which every time I put that wood in, I'm like, whew, pack your patience, because it just wasn't fun. Knowing that being my experience, Crafties, let me know. Like, have you cut basswood and had a completely different experience than I did? Maybe I did do something wrong, but maybe this is the way it is. So email me. I would love to hear your experiences with projects that you've done, cutting with your maker, with the knife blade into the basswood. You can email me at hello@wcapodcast.com. I really would love to hear from you. And until our next crafting adventure, take care.
That's all for this episode of Weekend Crafting Adventures. Now go get that Cricut machine off the shelf and get crafty. For more information on this crafting project, interesting tips, tricks, and techniques, visit wcapodcast.com. Until next time, when we embark on another adventure.